Many thanks for making a date on Marketplace today. Now, year-on-year inflation rate for the month of April recorded an upward adjustment of 0.2% from the rate recorded in March to 9.5%. According to Deputy Government Statistician David Combat, the surge in the rate for non-food subsector contributed to the marginal increase in inflation. The non-food group recorded a year-on-year inflation rate of 10.4% in April compared to 9.7% recorded in March the same year.
Within the non-food group, also, 5 subgroups recorded inflation rates that were higher than the group's average of 10.4%. And these are clothing and footwear, a rate of 14.3%, recreation and culture, a rate of 14.1%, transport, a rate of 13.2%, furnishings, household equipment, a rate of 12.8%. The least recorded in that group, the non-food group, is health, a rate of 5.9%. Let's look at the rates in the regions. The Upper West region has recorded the highest combined and non-food inflation rates, while Ashanti recorded the highest food inflation rate in April 2019. As I mentioned some time ago, if we say that the Ashanti region has the highest food inflation rate, does not mean that Ashanti food prices are highest in Ashanti. It's just comparing the price of food products in Ashanti in April 2018 to April 2019. So please, in interpreting this, we have to be careful. So these are the rates, with the Upper West recording the highest non-food inflation rate of 14.1% and the combined inflation rate of 11.5%. And Ashanti region recording, the lowest inflation rate for the food group.
Well, so even though the inflation rates in recent times have been in the single digits, there are some concerns the end-of-year target of 8% may not be reached. Economist with Data Bank, Courage Marty, joins us on phone to help us with some analysis. Good afternoon, Courage. Welcome to the market, please.
Good afternoon, thanks for having me.
All right, so what do you have to say about the current trends, the volatile trends of inflation that have been recorded in recent times? Are we heading, or are we, shall we be able to hit the target for inflation at the end of the year, 8%?
So I think it's going to prove very difficult for us to hit that 8.0% target by end of year. And I say this because you look at how we started the year with a sharp deterioration in the exchange rate, where at the peak of the depreciation, we saw about 13 or 14% depreciation year to mid-March this year at the Forex Bureau. And that is one of the price build-ups or price indicators for businesses on the market. And so when you import and you have to exchange the cedi for the dollar at that rate, you will pass it on. And the effect is still within the system, and although it is dying out steadily, it's still firmly within the system. Of course, there are downside pressures that will come from the port or import duty reduction that was implemented in early April. But I must say that overall, the inflationary pressures have elevated, the expectations have also elevated. Then on top of that, I think that the expansionary budget or the budget implementation for 2019 has also got to watch it, because the more you expand aggressively, you risk elevating aggregate demand, and that will put more pressure on the system. So if you look at the fact that I think overall policy has become more bullish than conservative, and that would be one key reason why, if it doesn't become tighter, we might fail to hit the 8.0% mark. Albeit there's still some decline in inflation to be expected.
Now, we've not witnessed significant increases in transport prices, but transport sector or subsector was also mentioned as one of the non-food groups contributing to this current marginal increase. Could you explain this trend?
Well, you look at fuel price, export prices today, and you compare them to a year ago, and you notice that the percentage increase should always be expected to pass through to inflation. So the development on the world market, which has translated onto the local, the funds, has also been a key factor for the increase in inflation. And of course, non-food inflation accounts for 56% of the overall overall inflation that we see. And so transport is one key one. Transport does not only affect, of course, does not only affect transport. Transport affects also the services and cost of operations as well. And so overall, there's a high chance that the impact on a lot of sectors from transport and fuel will be more significant than if it comes from other sectors.
So you are very certain we could reach the 8% end of year target?
No, I don't feel confident that 8.0% will be hit by end of year unless the policy regime becomes very tight, unless fuel price on the world market is favorable, unless the exchange rate remains stable. I think that the policy regime, and I must emphasize that the policy regime has become a bit more bullish than it was in the last 2 years. And that could also be another elevating risk to inflation. So for me, and then I was running my numbers, and it's proving very difficult for us to hit 8.0 by end of year. So it's not likely, in my view, as I speak right now, unless something drastic happens in our favor.
In the short term, what could be the outlook for the month of May?
Well, for the month of May, it looks like a decline because I think that as the exchange rate pass-through continues to decay or die out, the import duty reduction in April could start having marginal effect from May, right? Because the data window will cover that development. So that import duty could help. Then, of course, during the period, we've seen some relative stability on export prices, and I think that could also help slightly to reduce the rate of increase in the consumer price index. So overall, we could expect a marginal reduction in May inflation.
Many thanks for your time. Courage Marty is an economist with Data Bank. It's live on the marketplace. Now, MTN Ghana is urging the Social Security and National Insurance Trust, SNIT, to help raise concern over the negative impact of recent fiber cuts, which is affecting quality of service within the telecoms sector. The call was made when the telecoms giant presented a dividend of over 9 million Ghana cedis to SNIT, following an impressive financial performance in 2018. There's more in this report.
Giant MTN has presented a dividend of over 9 million cedis to the Social Security and National Insurance Trust, SNIT, after the company recorded strong financial performance in 2018, with profit before tax increasing by 16.5% to 1.6 billion cedis. The dividend presentation comes amidst recent incidents of fiber cuts, which has so far cost the company almost 30 million cedis in 2018 alone. Presenting the check to SNIT, Corporate Service Executive of MTN, Sam Cranton, expressed frustration over the situation, calling on SNIT to add its voice to help curb the menace.
We went through the IPO, which was very successful last year, and as a result of that IPO, SNIT invested in MTN. So we had our first AGM after we became a listed company, so now we're COM PLC. We had our first AGM yesterday morning, and I know that SNIT was represented as one of the shareholders, and we grossed in total of excess of 4,000 participants at the AGM meeting yesterday. That was a trade fair, and one of the agenda items on the program yesterday was the dividend, which was approved by the shareholders present. So we have a final dividend of 3 pesos per share.
Meanwhile, Deputy Director for Finance at SNIT, Michael Addo, commended MTN for the dividend paid. He noted the payment of dividend was evidence of SNIT's confidence in the telcos industry.
DDGIDD will be on top of you. I have to give you that. I will tell you that. I think it's quite notable to share with you certain developments that we've had with you, and that's why I said we look forward to a long-term relationship. GMMIS, maybe you can talk to a little bit about that.
With a market capitalization of 9.7 billion cedis, MTN remains the third largest listed company on the Ghana Stock Exchange. SNIT is also one of the biggest institutional investors in MTN.
Management of Women's World Bank in Ghana says it is ready for reforms by the Bank of Ghana to sanitize the savings and loans sector. The Bank of Ghana is expected to turn its attention on that category after a cleanup of commercial banks. Chief Executive of Women's World Bank in Ghana, Charlotte Lily Baidu, says the institution has a strong financial base after 30 years of operation in the country. She spoke with Love Business after donating a water reservoir to the female ward of Komfo Teaching Hospital. Prince Appiah has more.
Water is one of the critical things needed at the Komfo Teaching Hospital, especially the female wards. Senior member at the Obstetrics and Gynecology Department, Dr. Gerald Owusu-Boateng, explains the role water plays in their work.
We deal mainly with women's health, and a significant proportion is about surgeries and deliveries, and it's very bloody when you're doing surgery. If a woman is delivering, it's very bloody, and you need water, flowing water to always be able to have effective operational activity. So with this, it will it will contribute very significantly to our work.
He said this when officials of Women World Bank in Ghana donated a water reservoir to the female ward at the hospital. Dr. Boateng was excited by the gesture.
On behalf of the Directorate of Obstetrics and Gynecology, Komfo Teaching Hospital, we would like to thank Women's Bank for the wonderful donation that they've given to us. It couldn't have come at a better time. More so now that we're having challenges with water supply to the facility. I promise that we'll make very good use of it.
Management, accompanied by some of the staff, did a special presentation to the hospital, which was received by the Obstetrics and Gynecology Department. It was to honor the hospital and the mothers as they celebrate Mother's Day. Charlotte Lily Baidu is Chief Executive of Women World Bank in Ghana.
So we are here to present a little token for Women's World Banking. Women's World Banking is a financial institution. It's Women's World Banking Savings Center. This week when we are having Mother's Day. So normally we do those things in Accra and Takrady. So we decided that this time around, let's come and find out what the maternity ward really needs. They gave us a tour list. So we went through it and we thought that we can rather buy the polytank because water is life. So little token with my team. And to show our appreciation that we are taking very good care of the women when they come here. So this is a little thing.
Prince Appiah, report.
The Minister for Works and Housing yesterday at a press briefing announced some interventions for the housing markets in Ghana. Top of these interventions will be the establishment of a national mortgage fund which will provide financial assistance to deal with challenges of acquiring homes. Let's hear from the Sector Minister, Samuel Atachia.
Now, let me address the National Housing and Mortgage Fund. It is said a man will run depending on what is chasing him. It is the position of the ministry that unless we deploy revolutionary financial mechanisms, the yawning housing deficit will mock us for a long time. It is in the light of the above that the ministry is working hand in hand with the Ministry of Finance to create a national housing and mortgage fund. The fund would be a special purpose vehicle to leverage private capital into housing and infrastructure investments, and also enable the Ministry of Works and Housing channel long-term appropriate price financing towards the housing sector. The fund will create for the first time in the financial space a credible mortgage regime in Ghana to enable majority of our people, especially workers, have their own homes in the evening of their years. The fund will be sourced from pension funds, housing, bonds, grants, insurance companies, primary reserve of the central bank, treasury single account, and tax incentives. The ministry very much appreciates the pilot phase of the mortgage and housing finance market as captured at pages 64 and 65 of the budget statement and economic policy of the Government of Ghana for the 2019 financial year.
Will this be a panacea to our housing problems? Philip Namfuri raises some questions. He joins me in the studio to explain and give us some more education on the topic. What exactly should a proposed mortgage fund look like?
Okay, so Emmanuel, it's important to situate this into context. Everybody wants to own a home. Everybody wants to live in their own house. Nobody wants to rent forever. Nobody wants to live with a friend forever. But getting your own home comes with a cost. If you don't live in a house that's owned by your parents, you are going to start building from the scratch. It's going to cost you a lot. If you don't get a good contractor, it's going to really, really cost you. Then on the other hand, you can go and get a mortgage. And that one too is expensive because you'll be paying, servicing these loans over a course of 10, 15 to 20 years. But government feels that this is part of the reasons why we have a housing deficit. So they want to put this together. Over the course of financial years, we've seen different interventions in the housing market to help dealing with the housing deficit. The minister says it's around 2 million housing units. Previous years it was around 1.7 million. So they've come together, that's the Ministry of Works and Housing with the Ministry of Finance, to put together a special purpose vehicle. And by this, I just mean a standalone entity. That's the National Mortgage Fund that will source capital and deal with this. We've put together an infographic to educate our viewers and listeners. So let's take a look at that and we'll continue our discussions.
All right, so that looks like an outline of the whole mortgage scheme when it comes up. But Philip, will this really, or before then, could you explain to us what?
Certainly. So we have the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Works and Housing. They'll come together. They'll form, that was the first graph we showed, or the first picture. Then in the middle, we have the National Mortgage Fund, that's special purpose vehicle. It will be a standalone, so it will be a separate entity. You know, when we had the ESLA issue, there was a creation of a special purpose vehicle to deal with the issue separately. So that's that. Then they'll be sourcing funds from pension funds, housing bonds, from taxes, from, I'm sure, they said the Bank of Ghana's primary reserve and other sources. So that's basically the outline of the National Mortgage Fund. But I'm sure you want to know
whether it's really feasible and it will solve the problem, and at what cost. That's more important.
Okay, so mortgage funding, because of its long-term nature, requires long-term liabilities. And by long-term liabilities, I mean long-term funds. So somebody should be able to give you money for 10, 20, 30 years plus. Our deposit nature in the country, deposit profile is short-term. So banks are shunning away from mortgages. If you realize a bank like Republic Bank, GHL Bank are the ones who are very heavy when it comes to mortgage lending. Prior to GHL becoming a bank, when it was Ghana Home Loans, most of their funding were from external sources. So they will give you the latitude and the room to lend long-term. So it's always about getting long-term funds. If you don't have access to long-term funds, you can't really do anything in the mortgage market. Now, the other part is the cost. So with long-term lending comes some cost of it, because most of them give you the mortgages in foreign currency, and then you pay in Ghana cedi. So anytime our cedi depreciates, you hear people who have taken mortgages complaining because it's becoming expensive to service it, just because they have to go and borrow these funds.
Now, one thing I wanted to find out from you is what about if we are supposed to use like the pension scheme funds, if you mortgage that pension scheme for a housing facility, for instance, would that affect my end of service benefits, like end of pension benefits?
Okay, it's a fantastic question. Pension funds can help because of their also long-term liabilities, because you have a lot of years left, I have a lot of years left to work. But however, if you don't structure these properly, and these funds are given to people who are going to take mortgages, and they default, because this is 10 years, anything can happen. You can pass on, you can lose your job. That's your stable source of income, which you're going to use to service the debt. Then it becomes a problem. And if these things are not guaranteed, money going back to the pension funds will not provide the necessary return. So they'll have to price it into the mortgage that they're going to give you. So it will become a bit expensive because you have to account for all the eventualities. If you pass on, if you lose your job, what happens to the pension funds they've taken from you and I now? And then when we are 60, 61, 62, and we have to fall back on, it becomes another problem.
And certainly this initiative is only for formal workers, not informal.
I would believe so. It's for formal workers. Formal workers, I beg your pardon, because it's going to involve some applications and some steady income. Because mortgaging always has to deal with steady income. Every month you come here, we work, we are paid. The bank will deduct a certain amount from your income. So if all of a sudden you don't have any steady source of income, regular source of income, how are you going to service your mortgage? So it's a wonderful idea, but it's up to the government to ensure that it balances two things. One, affordability, and two, the commercial part of things. Because sourcing funds from private hands implies a return.
Okay.
So you have to balance the two. You can't just give out funds for free.
Does this situation happen elsewhere in the world, this intervention you're talking about?
Okay, so let me give you the US example. Prior to the 2008 financial crisis, some institutions like Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae were giving direct loans to people who wanted to buy homes. Then the investment banks realized that it was profitable. So what they did was to give money to these institutions, buy these loans, and sell these as securities to pension funds, etc. So what they stood in the middle, collected money from pension funds, gave it to these institutions, and then when you pay your mortgages, then your money goes to service those who have bought it. So it's possible. But however, when the mortgage market collapsed in the US, pension fund holders, everybody was affected. Right. So we must find a fine balance. We can use the pension funds, all right, but we must ensure that there's return guaranteed in it, so that when you're 60 and I'm 60, we have something to fall back on.
I believe we'll be talking to some prospective homeowners shortly to find out what they think about this whole initiative.
Sure, we will.
And bring up to speed with our viewers. And on that note, we wrap up this afternoon's edition of The Marketplace. Many thanks for your company. My name is Emmanuel Abuachi. Have a good afternoon.